Today's going to be another quick video as I'm going to do a pass over my existing APIs. Right now my rendering system can handle text rendering, but the API for it has a really big flaw. The way the system works, I can build batches of quads and then I submit the whole batch for rendering. When I'm building the batch, I determine UV coordinates for each quad, and then when I submit the batch, I determine a specific texture to use for the batch. Both the UV coordinates and the texture data are determined by a baked font. So if there's a specific font I want to use, I need to use the UV coordinates that are derived from that font and the texture data derived from that font. But there's actually nothing in the API that prevents the user from trying to use different fonts while they're building a batch. I could just say that this is the user's fault for breaking the correct contract of how the API is supposed to work. Since a batch can only have one texture, it can only contain text from one font. But the API makes it look so easy to mix fonts while you're building a batch, even though it's not going to work. So what is going to come up is that sometimes a user doesn't want to have to think about orchestrating all of the batches to be optimal and putting the right text in the right batch so that it uses the correct font. They're going to want to just say, use this font to put this text here, then use this font to put this text here, and so on, and not think about the fact that there are batches. That's more of an optimization thing they'll do when they're dealing with lots of text from multiple fonts. But when it's just throwing something together, that should be something that can just be automated, and they shouldn't have to think about which batch they're using and so on. And there's a pretty easy way I can fix this, so that's what I'm going to do today. Let's get started. The first I want to do is rearrange how I'm assigning names to functions in my draw layer here. The explicit batch management that I already have is going to want slightly longer names so that these short names can be used again or used connected to the more convenient layer that I'm going to sketch after the names are available. Here I'm setting up the code to parse two different fonts so that I'll actually be able to test if the new system is working. Right here, I've written some new usage code that uses two fonts. The API I've sketched no longer has the user directly managing batches. Instead, an implicit context is established when they use the function drawBegin, and then the calls to drawRect and drawString just take in the parameters specific to rectangles and strings. They don't take in the arena or the list anymore. The downside to an API like this is that the user no longer has a mechanism for deferring rendering, so out-of-order rendering and things like that aren't available. But the strength is that the API is very streamlined for simple in-order rendering tasks. I don't know if I'll like this in the long run or not. I might try it out and then want to figure out a way to put back in the deferred rendering while still doing the automation of batch segmenting. We'll figure that all out in the future, but for now I'm just going to try this one out, so let's go in and implement it this way. And here we have text coming from two separate fonts. Before I finish this off, I want to do a quick pass over this API again to make sure that I've set it up in such a way that a user who wanted to could compose it with the lower level explicit batch management and the raw low level submit APIs. That should be relatively easy cleanup, and then I'll be good for today.